Welcome to Forces of Character podcast, where we have conversations about building a life of impact. I'm your host, Chad Hennings, and I am excited for the conversation we're going to have today with our guest, Matt Byrd. Matt, welcome, bud.
Thank you, buddy.
Appreciate that you're
great
here.
To be here. Thank you.
You know, reason I'm excited to have this conversation is, just for our audience, your resume would make Captain America envious, my friend. From Air Force Academy graduate, combat fighter pilot, Air Force Thunderbird, working for an American icon like Ross Perot, president, CEO of Hillwood Aviation, but I think even more importantly, husband, father, and grandpa.
Yeah.
Well, again, welcome.
Great to be here.
So,
appreciate it.
We talk a lot about family being the foundation as to who we are, either good or bad, the influence and the impact that family has in our lives. Just share a little bit with us about your upbringing and some of the influences that you had as a young person growing up.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. It's great to be here. I was blessed as a young man to have two parents that loved me and showered that love upon me, and I felt loved. And my dad was my role model. He played football for Cal Berkeley in the '59 Rose Bowl, so he's a man's man, and ended up going to the Air Force Academy as an instructor. That's a long story, but he ended up there as an instructor at the Air Force Academy, and now I'm third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, had a paper route, doing all the things a kid does. But the people that he had around him were my role models. And I wanted to grow up and be like those guys.
Just some of the traits that they had. What did you, even as a young man, young boy, what did you admire about them that you knew that they were different than some of the other dads around? It's
pretty superficial, but maybe that's the way an 8-year-old's brain works. They were in shape, they were funny, and they drove sports cars. Oh, and they also had good-looking girlfriends. So these guys were my heroes. I just thought that they were the best, and I asked them, how do you go to the Air Force Academy? So now fast forward, they'd come visit. I'm making the decision of what I'm going to do for college. And we actually got into some pretty serious debates because there were some of these guys that didn't have a good experience at the Air Force Academy. And we got into a serious discussion about the merits, because it was hard. And you remember, and some of them carried those scars, but at the end of the night, and I remember waking up the next morning, the guy who was opposed to the Air Force Academy, he wrote me a note, and he said, "Go for it, it's worth it."
Wow, even after all the struggles, the obstacles, that reminds me of, for you from just a philosophical outlook, lessons in life. Have you learned more from success or more from the setbacks and the obstacles that you've had to achieve and overcome?
Man, that's a tough one because, there have been setbacks, but nothing that I dwell on. Thank you, Lord, for the blessings, far more than I deserve.
Amen. Amen. So ultimately, you get to the Air Force Academy. Did you always wanted to be a fighter pilot?
No, I didn't know. My dad was a heavy guy. He was a private pilot, and then he was in a C-130 squadron. And that was a part of his life, but it didn't really touch me mentally or spiritually or ambition-wise. When I flew gliders at the Academy and I soloed, I flipped out in the airplane. I was actually hooting and hollering the first time I was in a glider by myself. It was the greatest experience that I had ever had. And so that kind of set the tone. Then in T-41s, I've got a C-141 instructor pilot, but I don't know, he's an instructor pilot. And he's yelling at me, altitude, airspeed, altitude, airspeed. And I wasn't having a lot of fun. He was sick one day. I had a different IP. So I'm just repeating what that previous IP had said, altitude, airspeed, altitude, airspeed. And the guy goes, "What are you doing? Just take the airplane and move it over here and do this and do that." And it blew my mind. And so I never went for extra instructions, but I requested EI with this guy. I went in and I sat down and I said, "What did you do in the airplane?" it was so different than my other instructor pilot. And it was very simple. He just said, that guy's a heavy guy. I'm an Eagle driver. I fly F-15s. I'm a fighter pilot. That's how you fly fighters. And I said, well, how do you become a fighter pilot? He said, get good grades, go to Shepherd. You'll have a better chance of getting a fighter out of Shepherd than the other pilot training bases.
And that's where it was the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program, where we train with our NATO allies. It kind of indoctrinates you, the people that you're going to be going to war back in the Cold War era with,
Right.
establish those relationships.
Yeah, right here in North Texas. Great program.
In Wichita Falls. Outstanding. So you're at the academy. Now you're working towards that.
That's right.
Get to Shepherd, to be a fighter pilot. Talk about your relationships, friendships that you established there at the Air Force Academy, because I know some of these last for a lifetime.
For a lifetime. My roommate was, and still is, one of my best friends. Very bright. We had the same major. Econometrics was kicking my butt. The more I studied, the worse I did in class. There was no correlation to performance. He was killing it. He was setting the curve. And I would talk to him, how do you do it? It just didn't register in my brain. But through T41s, you had to get a 5 on your check ride to get to Shepherd. And when I would study, there was a direct correlation to how well I did. The time I spent studying resulted in me doing better in the airplane. So I spent more time studying airplanes than I did econometrics. I got a 5 on my check ride, and I ended up going to Shepherd. And Tim Buckley flew F-16s, flies for Southwest. He's one of the senior guys at Southwest now.
That's awesome. Well, lifetime relationships.
Yeah.
Okay, you get to Shepherd.
Yeah.
You know, you graduated, you go from that high of graduating from, you know, an elite service academy to now the real world. You know, that was only one of the funny things that all the instructors talked about the Air Force. Wait till you get to the real Air Force
Right.
at the academy. This is not the real Air Force. So you get to, quote unquote, the real Air Force, and kind of, did that academy experience help? Or did you kind of have to learn from the fire hose all over again and start from scratch? How much of it translated and crossed over?
This gets into a philosophical discussion that I wrestle with myself. It's a little bit like physical fitness. At the Air Force Academy, they make you do wind sprints. They make you go to class. They make you do this. I hadn't internalized it. It was an external force. I actually kind of fought against it while I was there. Now at pilot training, it was a little bit of the same, especially among the FAPEs, the first assignment instructor pilots. It was an external force, and I fought against that. There were 2 guys that helped me internalize it. Tom Beatty was an F4 guy, and that same fighter pilot mentality. And then Steve Pepper was a Brit. Flying with those guys was completely different. They treated me like a human being, not like a robot or someone that they would yell at. They let me make mistakes. They were good enough. Here's the critical point. They were so good, they knew that whatever I would do, whatever mistakes I would make, they could recover from. So they let me learn by doing. And it really set my standard for how I lead people, being good enough to have a foundation around that they're not going to crash and kill themselves and me, but to let them make mistakes and learn. And that's kind of, those 2 guys were foundational in my experience.
You know, I hope particularly for you young listeners that are paying attention to what Matt's saying, these are true lessons in leadership as well as individual development, some of the important characteristics and traits that we have to be that leader, to be that force of character. So, you know, that's awesome. Make it through pilot training. First assignment. What did you get, and kind of go through on active duty some of the aircraft that you were fortunate enough to be able to fly?
Yeah. Before I make it through pilot training, I meet a girl.
Oh.
And I had 4 sisters, and they would always set me up, and I never had to pursue dates or girls. This girl, there was something about her. And when I first saw her, anyway, It was life-changing. After we met, it just, I got to tell this story because it was one of my favorite small world stories. At the Air Force Academy, you go on Operation Air Force. And I meet a man in Charleston, South Carolina. And me and two other guys are in a Mexican restaurant. And this older gentleman, probably younger than I am now, comes up to me and says, "Are you guys in the military?" And we say, "Well, sir, we're cadets at the Air Force Academy." He says, "Thanks for your service. Dinner's on me." So we said, "That's never happened before." Okay, great. Because you don't have any money anyway at that time frame. So it's really a big deal. So we said, well, maybe we ought to go thank him. So we go up to his table, introduce ourselves, and he says, "I'm Daddy Joe Miller. I'm a doctor in Wichita Falls, Texas. This is my wife. This is my son. This is Beth. She's my youngest daughter. She's my ugliest daughter. She's beautiful. If you ever come to Wichita Falls, you can marry one of my daughters." So I meet Leela Cadle, and she's talking about her best friend, Sarah Miller, and her daddy, Joe. And I go, "Joe Miller? Dr. Joe Miller?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Let's get in the car." This is 24 hours after I met her. We go to Dr. Miller's house. He answers the door. He says, "I remember you. Get in here." And that's how it started. It was the most amazing thing.
It was very providential.
For sure. For sure. And that was one of the lessons to me, is to listen. Listen to God. We've been married 38 years.
And we'll get into the number of children and grandkids now.
Blessed.
So when did you and Leela get married? At what point?
So I get an A-10 out of Shepherd. And the way that we did it was a dunk tank. I don't know how you did it for your drop night, but it's very dramatic, the whole drop night when you find out your assignment. Very competitive. It's steel on steel. You're competing against everybody in your class. And I get an A-10. And as they drop me in and I go underwater, I hear England. And I think, I'm going to England, like you did. And I come up out of the water and there's a banner, England Air Force Base, Louisiana. And Leela will tell you, she didn't want to, we were just dating at the time. I think it would have been a stretch to go overseas and maintain the relationship. It wasn't the world of today where we have constant communication for free. It's very expensive to call and on and on and on. Letters don't convey the message. So I think God gave me a fighter base the closest to where she lived. And so we ended up getting married in 1987. And we stayed there for 4 years. And our son was born there in 1989. Adam.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you went from A-10s, then you went to fly an aircraft that a lot of people didn't know even existed at that point in time. Talk about that transition.
It was secret. And this is another leadership point. People ask a lot, how do I become successful? My answer is, do the best of the job you have. And I was the best I could be. I really wanted that whole transition with Tom Beatty and Steve Pepper, I had now internalized. And I wanted to be the best. I studied hard, I've reviewed tapes, and in the A-10, it was all about bombs on target on time and shooting the gun. And we would bet every sortie. So they would take your scores, and the first few months, I'm losing those bets, and I'm buying other guys' lunches. I didn't like that. I want to win. I want to be the best. And I studied hard, and all of a sudden, I'm winning. We had a Top Gun competition where 72 A-10s came from Tucson. So we have 144 A-10s on the ramp at England Air Force Base. And I won the whole thing as a second lieutenant. Won the whole thing. And I'm sitting there, Leela's dating. There's a black and white picture I have in my office where she's sitting on my lap at the award ceremony. We're dating at the time. And I win the whole thing. And she's got this surprised look, and I'm looking at her like, yeah.
Who's your daddy, right?
Who's your daddy?
But that's awesome. But you end up going to fly the F-117, the stealth fighter.
Because I had highlighted myself in a good way that we had this program that was secret, and it was the most expensive fighter program in the world. It was stealth, the first time stealth even was mentioned. And I get selected. So I'm out in Las Vegas at a red flag, And my commander, Gene Renuart, says, hey, be in your room Wednesday night at 10 o'clock. You're going to get a call. No one's in there. It's Vegas. No one's in their room at 10 o'clock at night. So anyway, I'm in my room. The phone rings at 10 o'clock. And I think it's a joke because I hear this German accent, and it's Colonel Klaus Klauser. And I said, Captain Byrd. And he said, so I understand you're a volunteer for our program. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, okay, we've reviewed your records. We think you'll be a good fit. Do you have any questions? And I said, yes, sir. What program? What airplane? He goes, I cannot tell you. So I sit there and now I'm dumbfounded. And I said, well, can I ask another question? He said, sure. I said, will I like it? He goes, oh yeah, you'll like it. So fast forward about 6 months, I now fly blindfolded up to a dry lake bed, go across this lake bed, still blindfolded, go into this security shack. They take the blindfold off, take my picture. This metal post, they put it between your fingers, they scan your hand. I'd never seen anything like that before. They hand you a laminated badge. Now no blindfold, you go across this dry lake bed. You go through another strange entrance where glass doors open, you step in, glass doors close, you put your hand on that thing, glass doors open, and Lieutenant Colonel Bob Mayer is standing there. And he goes, Bob Mayer. I said, Captain Matt Byrd. He said, have you seen an airplane yet? I go, no, sir. So we walk down, it's dark now. He presses a button, these hangar doors open. So the first thing I see is this white floor. And as I look up, I see this black airplane, and the wings are like this. And these 4 pitot tubes, I now know, I thought they were machine guns on the front. And then the canopy with this jagged sawtooth construction, and then above it, a big red, white, and blue American flag. And I look at him and I said, how many seats? And he goes,
Yes.
so you know you're the guy.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
So fast forward, I don't know how long that was between that and the first Gulf War. Talk a little bit about that first mission.
Yeah.
The emotions, what was going through your mind at that point in time?
Divine intervention. This is July of 1990. August 2nd of 1990, Saddam invades Kuwait. By the end of August, the first squadron had deployed. So I'm in the training squadron, the 417th. The 415th deploys. I'm slated to go to the 416th. So they're all still there. I go to the Tokakel, the Tonopah Officers Club and Chinese Laundry, the first night I'm there. And I walk in and guys are shooting flaming drambuis. And a guy with a mustache, his mustache is on fire. And guys that I'd played rugby with at the academy are there in the room. And I said, I'm home. So I go meet with all my buddies. They know who I am because there's a list and they can blackball you. Anyone, if one person lines out your name, you're not getting selected to the program. I passed that test. I'm in the program. I'm there. There's a big buildup through Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So from August 2nd, we send 600,000 Americans over to the Middle East. I'm now learning an airplane. I haven't even flown a stealth yet. I'm in the simulator. I'm devouring every book that they give me. We've got Vietnam vets teaching us. There's only 2 people in my class. Fast forward, I have my check ride at Thanksgiving. I'm now in the 416th. They deploy the 15th of December. They leave me because I'm not mission ready yet. My wife's pregnant. She's 7 months pregnant. We spend Christmas in Las Vegas, and then somebody knows something's about to happen. So they take the jets from the 417th, because the 415th is gone, the 416th is gone, and they need guys to fly the 417th jets, and I get to go. And January 16th, the war started, and for 49 days, we flew combat missions. They were worried about me because I only had about 30 hours in the airplane. So I had some local area orientation sorties, but then Al Whitley, the wing commander, I briefed with him. He asked me some questions, and he sets me free. In a stealth, you're by yourself. You don't have a wingman. And when you stealth up, you retract your antennas, they can't call you on the radio. You are gone in bad guy territory, and you realize at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're all alone. So you have a lot of, these are 6-7 hour sorties, you have a lot of time to think.
Amen to that. What a phenomenal story regarding that experience. And I was just curious for some of our female listeners out there, your wife, I mean, this is stuff, you're flying a secret mission. A lot of this stuff she's not privy to and aware of that.
No, none of it. We had a code word because they monitored our phones at Tonopah, and we had a code word if I wasn't coming home, meaning I was going to go to war. I said, okay, because she'd always ask me, what do you want for dinner? And I said, okay, let's say barbecue chicken. If I say barbecue chicken, that means I'm not coming home. So we're on the phone, and she goes, what do you want for dinner? And I said, how about barbecue chicken? And she said, barbecue chicken? And I said, yep, barbecue chicken. So I get to Khamis Mushat in southwest Saudi Arabia, and someone had talked about when D-Day would be. So they shut down the phones there. So we couldn't talk. So Leland and I, we could write letters, but now I'm busy, and she's pregnant, and I'm going to war. I get home one night, home here in a hangar underground, and I'm in a room with 13 other guys, and I throw my stuff in a locker, and I climb up under my bunk, and I lay my head down, and there's something on my pillow. So I get my flashlight, and it's a yellow sticky. It said, yo, Birdman, congrats, you had a baby girl. And I went, okay, I knew, but the sonogram said it was going to be a boy. So I get up, throw my flight suit back on, go to the command post. My squadron commander's there. He said, okay, the Red Cross will allow you to call the hospital. So we patch through. They're afraid they're going to lose her, so she has to go from the hospital bed down to the desk so they don't lose the call. And it's a girl? It's a girl? It's a girl. It's a girl? And we didn't have any girls' names picked out. So she named her after my mom, Margaret, but we call her Maddie. Yeah. And Maddie Byrd is now in the Army. She's a lawyer, and she's teaching law at West Point.
Very good.
Yeah, amazing.
What a story. I know.
But then you compartmentalize.
Sure.
So I hang up the phone, and I'm back now in combat. 6,000 miles away, and getting ready for my next mission.
We talk about mindset a lot. Who you are, the focus on, mission critical aspects and mindset. And as we've talked in the past, Grossman's book on killing, the psychological costs of learning to kill in combat, our war and society, where Grossman talks about basically the closer you get to that violent event, I mean, the closer you get in physical proximity, the greater the impact on the individual psychologically. So it's different from dropping a bomb at 30,000 feet versus a hand-to-hand combat where you're fighting with knives. I mean, and killing someone, that cost is there. And he even makes reference to studies that were shown that there's a little over 20% prior to the Vietnam conflict where individuals, frontline troops, would actually engage in shooting at the enemy. They would either help their buddy or they'd shoot over their heads because of that commandment, that moral aspect of, thou shalt not murder, or thou shalt not kill. And then Vietnam changed that, where they desensitized people from shooting bullseye silhouettes to, human silhouettes and going in. You had an experience of, combat experience of dropping munitions on people, but also you had the opportunity to go down and see some of the destruction that your squadron went through. Talk a little bit about that and the impact that had on your life.
Yeah, so you got to go back to that 27-year-old brain, and you're trained for this, and your training kicks in. When you're being shot at, there's a lot of emotions, a lot of adrenaline, and you revert back to your habit patterns. So habit patterns are critical, and you're doing the job. And peer pressure is really important. We would review each other's tapes after the mission, and they'd sit around with popcorn and watch whether you hit the target or not. You've got 3 pictures on your knee. You've got a big blow up of the area. You've got the building, and then you got the DIMPI, the direct mean point of impact. that they want the bomb to go in. And some of these are high priority targets. This is the Osiris nuclear reactor, Saddam's palace, chemical, biological weapon sites. And so they're high interest targets. You want to do the best you can. Writing letters, Leela, we laugh about this because in my letter, I just said I'm bombing buildings. I get back now, fast forward about 9 months, and she says, "Why are you carrying a gun all the time?" And I said, "Well, I killed a lot of people in the war." And she said, "I don't know if the joke's on me or on you, because I thought you were saying you were only bombing buildings," but she knew there were people in those buildings. So yeah, you go through that. I think you rationalize that you're doing your job. You want to perform for your peers, but also there's a deeper subconscious that you know that you're doing a lot of damage. And now, at this phase of my life, I've come to realize it's a lot easier to destroy something than it is to build something. As we're investing in companies to try to create new electric vertical takeoff and landing machines, to create a new mode of transportation, it's hard to build that whole system. It's pretty easy to tear it down.
Yeah, well, that's actually a great segue. If you don't mind, we can talk Captain America stuff at a later time regarding the Air Force Thunderbirds and your time in that aerial demonstration team. But, you know, you talked about right now, you missed one child, your daughter's birth. Mm-hmm. What was the motivation for you to transition from active duty military to now, tell a little bit about the story, first of all, how you met Ross Jr., but to go work for the Perots?
Yeah, on the Thunderbirds, I did an air show at the Alliance Fort Worth Airport, Alliance, Texas. We did a Farkle Friends and Kin Likely extension. So my wife's there, Adam and Maddie are there, her parents are there, and our friends. And there's a dinner. And I'm standing at the easel, walking in, trying to figure out where I'm going to sit, where we're going to sit. And a guy walks up right here, and he sticks out his hand and says, "Ross Perot Jr." And I said, "Captain Matt Byrd." And he said, "What'd you do in the war?" And I said, "I flew the stealth fighter." He goes, "What targets did you hit?" I said, "Well, some of the most memorable ones are Saddam's palace and the Osiris nuclear reactor." He said, "Okay, you're sitting with me." So I sat with him, and Leela talked to his wife, Sarah, and Ross had a lot of questions. He was an F4 guy in the Air Force. He had a lot of questions. He was in the Pentagon during Desert Storm. So he knew the ATO, the Air Tasking Order. He knew the targets. He knew what it took. So he asked a lot of questions. And then he says to me, "Do you want to go fly a helicopter tomorrow?" I said, "I'd love to. I'd never flown a helicopter." And he was the first man to fly a helicopter around the world. So I'm excited to fly with him. I'm excited to fly in a helicopter. But I was blown away by the 27,000 acres that he owned that we looked at. And I'm thinking as we're flying, this is bigger than any Air Force base I've ever been on. But this is in a private individual's hands. We land, I look at him and I said, "What's your mission? What are you trying to accomplish here?" And he said, "We want to raise the bar on the quality of life in the communities that we serve." What a beautiful legacy. As fighter pilots, we're trying to kill people and destroy things. But if you can build something, create a better quality of life for those that follow you, what a powerful legacy that is. So it stayed with me. I finished the Thunderbirds, 2 more years, went to school, went to staff, but always thought about Ross. And when we'd come home to visit Leela's parents, on and on, I'd call him. I'd say, "What's going on?" He's building the American Airlines facility. He's buying the Mavericks. We're building the Texas Motor Speedway. Let's go fly. Let's look at it. So we continued that for about 6 years. Okay, then we get to an inflection point in our life. I'm on the fast track. I'm promoted early to major, early to lieutenant colonel. I'm now going to be in line to be the squadron commander at Spangdahlem. We drive from Ramstein up to Spangdahlem for a promotion ceremony. We're going through the gate, and the gate says, always ready to deploy, always ready to employ. Leela looks at me and says, does this mean you're still going to be gone? I'd missed 3 of my 5 children being born. We, on the drive home, prayed, talked about it, and we decided we're getting out of the active duty. We're getting off that treadmill.
Wow, major decision, because you had spent your whole life building up to that process, I mean, of your individual pursuit of excellence, of being that fighter pilot, being the elite.
My whole life.
Your whole life.
Everything everyone had ever told me, be all you can be. But now God had given me this woman. We talked about the providential meeting, and now blessed with 5 kids, 5 healthy kids, 3 of which I wasn't even there when they were born. Didn't meet Maddie till she was 5 months old. So now I'm praying, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? Why am I here? Your will be done, not mine. And I came to the realization I'd been lied to. I'd been lied to by a lot of secular influences. I call it the beer commercial. On TV, every 15 minutes, there's a beer commercial. And there's good-looking people standing around, mingling, drinking beer. And that's what the world tells you you should do. But now I've been blessed with this responsibility of a wife and 5 kids. And I now understood my responsibility was to be a husband, a father, a provider for what I'd been given. So we got out.
You know, that reminds me of a quote. It says, watch your thoughts become your words, watch your words become your actions, watch your actions becomes your behavior, watch your behavior becomes your character, and watch your character becomes your legacy. Mm-hmm. I mean, it resonates with me in the fact that, you know, we've been able to accomplish and achieve a lot of different things in life, you know, material possessions, wealth, media fame, social fame, whatnot. But the true lasting aspect of legacy is relationships. Mm. With your family, with your God, with your family, you know, and with your community. So, I mean, I applaud you for jumping off that treadmill, because that took a lot of courage, I'm sure, to be able to do that, because you probably had a lot of friends and mentors in the Air Force. Like, what are you doing?
Right. No, guys that had sponsored me, promoted me, mentored me to be where I was in the Air Force. The general, 4-star general who had lined me up to be the squadron commander at Spangdahlem. I had to call him and tell him I'm not, but God intervened. So what am I going to do? I'm an F-16 guy. I call Carswell and they hire me. Almost immediately, I get a call. It was funny. Leela's sister actually called first. She was all excited. She said, Ross Perot just called. His secretary wants your number. And we're in Germany, and I've been hired by Carswell. But Wednesday night, I'm reading Adam a book, and Leela comes running in, international phone call from Ross Perot Jr. And he said, Birdman, heard you're getting out. I said, yes, sir. I'm going to go fly with the Spads at Carswell. And that's the unit he had flown with. And he goes, yeah, I heard that. Dad and I have been talking. We want you to come work for us. I said, I'm a fighter pilot. What am I going to do with you guys? He goes, don't worry. We'll figure it out. And that's how he introduces me now. He says, we're still trying to figure it out.
You know, that is awesome. And you mentioned Dad being an American icon, Ross Perot. You talk about entrepreneurship, you talk about resiliency, commitment, dedication, grit, honor, integrity.
Right.
He's the man.
Yeah.
What was it like working for him?
Unbelievable. So I worked with him for 20 years, from 99 to when we lost him in 2019. When Ross Jr. replaced him as president and CEO at Perot Systems, he brought Darcy Anderson and I over as part of his team. So I got to work with his dad. The takeaways from him that I now try to emulate, he cares about his people. There's that saying, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Sure.
He cared about his people. He was competent. He didn't have a computer. He's known as the father of information technology, but he never sent an email. He'd pick up the phone and call people. But he was competent, and he had the big ideas. He could communicate that big idea that people could resonate with and follow. And the last thing is he was a man of character. in his private moments, he was who he was in his public moments. I'm flying with him to a speech in San Francisco, and he's on his plane, and he's on the phone talking to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because there's an injured warrior that wants prosthetic devices to run a marathon, but the VA will only provide a certain level of care. So he's working issues when he could be doing whatever he wants to on his private airplane, but he's caring about wounded warriors. He was a great example for me.
He had quite the sense of humor too, I hear.
Well, we learned at the Air Force Academy spirit missions, and we would do spirit missions. He continued that because he was a 1953 graduate of Annapolis, so Naval Academy grad. So healthy rivalry with Air Force, and it always came to a head when Navy was playing Air Force. So I could go on and on with stories about games that we would play back and forth, but he had me arrested, he had me followed, he'd send pictures to my wife, on and on and on. He would have the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders in my office. He'd take pictures of them and then send them to my wife and say, "This is what your husband does all day." Amazing man.
That's an awesome sense of humor. But he created a culture, and from your transition from active duty to corporate America, culture's huge. How easy was the transition from that culture, warfighter culture, to working now for a man in corporate America that has been very successful? Comparable cultures or similarities or differences?
The first day, several things. The first day, he talked to the group of us that were new, and he said, you get a DUI, I'm going to fire you. If you cheat on your wife, I'm going to fire you. And he was just that blunt. He goes, why would I trust you with my money if your wife can't trust you? So you cheat on your wife, I'm going to fire you. I get home that night and tell Leela, I said, well, I'm still subject to the UCMJ. It was the same. The other thing that really stayed with me, in a fighter squadron, you had to add value. We had a Top Gun chart, and it's back to that betting. And if you won, you were on the top left. If you did not win, you were on the bottom right of the chart. And so you walk in, everybody knows who's adding value. In the corporate world, it's the same thing. Sustainability is making more money than you spend. A company, for it to stick around, you need to make more money than you spend. So as an individual in that company, how are you adding to the bottom line? And I just figured out, I'm going to add value wherever I can. If they make me in charge of a hangar, I'm going to sweep the hangar floors, and they're never going to be so clean. And so that when customers come in, they're going to want to be there because it looks like an excellent facility. So I just decided I'm going to add value wherever I can, just like in a fighter squadron.
That's awesome. And, we have a couple minutes left in this segment, but talk about how I'll say you took one for the team, adding value when you moved your family over to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And spent 7 years over there.
Right.
Just talk a little bit about that experience, and maybe weave in there too, examples of just how business is different in overseas versus conducted here in the U.S.
Yeah, very, very different. The first thing that comes to mind is Ross Perot Sr.'s sense of humor. We had a going away party, and he sang in the microphone, "How can I miss you if you'll never leave?" So, they sent me off. He also told me quietly, he said, 22 hours from when you call, I'll come get you. And he had done the Iranian hostage, right. So I knew he meant it.
On Wings of Eagles.
On Wings of Eagles. So I felt comfortable bringing my wife and 4 daughters to the Middle East. Listen, it's a different culture there. You boil the ocean. I have a lot of friends there, and I respect them. However, their underlying ethos is get away with whatever you can. And we have a Judeo-Christian ethos of do unto others as you would have done unto you. They'll screw the foreigner and then brag about it to their buddies. And I had to go into negotiations with a mindset and understand the difference, because they weren't thinking like I was raised.
Well, Matt, before we took our break, you had mentioned some of the differences in the nuance of how other cultures do business. And I think so important to us as individuals, as leaders, we have to figure out who we are as first. And I say that in regards of identity. What you do does not define who you are, because I'm sure from who am I? Matt Byrd, the Air Force Academy graduate, Matt Byrd, the stealth fighter pilot, Matt Byrd, the Air Force Thunderbird, who am I? But for a working definition for us and for our audience, I define identity as that filter that you pass your thoughts, your words, and your experiences through that provide meaning and impact. In other words, it's kind of like your worldview. So with that, I know you had established an identity, but when did that make a difference for you in regards to dealing with individuals and corporations and companies and other cultures like that? When did you notice that, man, I have to really hone who I am as an individual? It
happened in an interview. I'm with General Bethurem, and I want to be a Thunderbird. I want to be a Thunderbird. I want to stay in Las Vegas, and I'm now 28 years old, and I'm interviewed, and he's got my packet right in front of him. He's gone through, and it's a very extensive application package. He's got it in front of him. And he asked me the question that defined this moment. He said, "Who is Matt Byrd?" I could have recited my resume, but he had it in front of him. So it made me think for a second, who is Matt Byrd? And I said, okay, a person is what they do. And I do according to my priorities. And my first priority is my God, then my family, then my work. And that's how I make decisions. And you go then to what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. I didn't always get that right, that prioritization. When I was trying to be all I could be as a fighter pilot, I sacrificed my family. I missed birthdays, I missed events, I missed Little League games. Now older, I look back and I think that I was wrong on those prioritization. I think I still could have been a good fighter pilot and maybe a better dad. So, but that hierarchy of priorities is what defines me, and it came to me in that interview.
Yeah, I totally relate to that experience. One question that I had kind of tangential to that is presence. When you would be home, when you're home, you were there physically, but did you ever struggle with kind of being there mentally, where you're still back at the office?
No, yeah. Still do. My brain is all over the world. And it wasn't always roses and chocolates. I remember with 5 kids, little kids, it's hard. So I'm working Monday through Friday, 12-hour days, trying to be the best fighter pilot I could be. And now I get home and it's lawn care and vehicle maintenance, and then running to church on Sunday morning, and then wanting to collapse or hopefully watch a football game, but I'm taking care of kids or whatever, trying to give Leela a break, and asking myself, is this all there is? Being in a phase of life that was very, very demanding, that gives me sympathy now for my 5 kids we have 4 grandbabies, and 2 of our daughters are pregnant, so we're about to have 6, and congratulations on being a granddad. You now can have empathy for your kids that are going through that phase of life. It's a phase we go through, it doesn't last forever, and we tell them, enjoy, don't endure. Enjoy it.
Amen. And that's where you and I have laughed. I wish we could have maybe skipped that parental role and gone directly to being the grandparent role, right? You had to earn your stripes.
That's right.
I'll ask you a challenging question. I didn't know if I was going to ask this or not, but we only know what we know based on our own perception of reality regarding the 360 look, self-awareness. If Leela was sitting right here and I would ask her, who is Matt Byrd? What does he do well? What does he need to work on? What would she say?
He works too hard. I think she would say that. I think that she would say I'm effective in the work that I do, but she thinks I work too hard.
So have you, knowing what you know, what do you do now to kind of address that? Are you taking active steps, or are you still pushing it up?
No, so yesterday she had hand surgery, and I asked my assistant, I said, just clear my schedule on Tuesday. Whatever we've got, it's not more important than my wife. And I prioritize my God, my family, my work. And Leela fit into number 2 yesterday. I don't always get it right, but sometimes I do.
We talk about, just the aspect of family and your faith. Talk a little bit more about how faith has impacted you. I know it's a journey that life is, being excellent is not necessarily a destination. It's a journey. We're all growing. How has your faith impacted you? I know you've mentioned your faith several times, but where were you, Matt Byrd, sworn in second lieutenant, graduate from the Air Force Academy, to where you are today?
Yeah. I would even go, if we're going to do a sine wave on that, my parents, again, blessed me with a very strong foundation. And I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy. I had First Communion. I had confirmation. I did all of that. And that was a part of my being. And the Proverbs raise them up in the way, and when they're old, they will not depart from it.
Yeah.
But when I was young, I departed from it. It was that lie that I'd been fed, the beer commercial. And I wasn't going to church. I was living a very secular life. And I didn't want to be married. I wanted to live the fighter pilot dream. I wanted a girlfriend in every port. I wanted to run around the world and be free. But I loved her. And there was this struggle going on. It was probably the biggest struggle in my life, to now settle down with the girl that I loved. And we had a fight one night. I remember exactly where I was, in Tucson, Arizona. She's in Wichita Falls. We're on the phone and we're fighting about something. And so we hang up. It wasn't it was an abrupt hang up. And I go to sleep. I've always slept very well, never had a challenge there. But I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I hear, call her, tell her you love her. I picked up the phone, called her. She answered, 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And it was done. It was settled. The angst, the struggle that was in my soul was gone. And the commitment to her, and I knew it was from God. I knew it was from God. But then again, that sine wave, you get focused on things and you lose the focus on God. And I read Billy Graham's book, Just As I Am. He struggled. If Billy Graham could struggle, and he talks about in that book, walking through a forest and talking to God. And he said, trust me. And Billy Graham said, I trust him. And that was a turning point in his life. And that was in 1997. I was in Prague and I was reading that book, and that reaffirmed my faith. And I think it's been pretty steady with God. I found a great pastor here. He's a mentor, Bill Ramsey. It's someone I lean on when I need to make decisions. I listen to him every week and I try to learn from him. So I think it's been a steady climb, but also I'm surrounded by men of faith. I call you when I have issues, DEI issues, what I'm wrestling with. What does the Christian faith say about this? Ross Perot Jr., you know what he says? It's very simple. He wakes up in the morning and says, Lord, your will be done, not mine.
That's awesome. Well, commenting back on you and Leela, the phone conversation is, not to let the sun go down on your anger.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where, again, I think
Thank
it's
you,
very
Lord.
providential.
Yep.
What you mentioned is, to me is mindset. Again, I keep going back to that because it's choices that you made, intentionality. It's not allowing life to be reactionary. You're very proactive. Mm-hmm. And I'll just, commenting from in Romans chapter 8, where it talks about mindset. You have the mindset of the flesh and the mindset of the spirit.
Yeah.
And it's a choice. I mean, we all have a choice to make. You know, life's a series of choices. Choose wisely.
Yeah.
You know, and the choices that you have made.
I'd add a third one. There's the Holy Spirit, there's the human spirit, and there's the hellish spirit. And I think they all three exist.
And you get pulled in multiple directions.
Correct.
Which kind of where I want to finish our conversation on here is conversation that you and I have had many, many times over the last few years. Growing up for us, coming up through the system, through the Air Force, at the academy, through active duty, meaning professional athletics, you competing active in your, either as a Thunderbird or now even with Perot companies, meritocracy versus some of the fad as of late has been DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusivity piece.
You already didn't earn it.
Where you didn't earn it. You know, the culture that you experience, that you profess, that you have, your core values, et cetera, at Hillwood Aviation, you know, at Perot companies, at all the Hillwood companies, it's still based on that aspect of meritocracy. And I'll just give you an open forum if whatever you want to say in that regard.
Yep.
Of the difference between the two and why one works and why one doesn't work, why one's time true tested and why one's a
It's
fad.
all back to adding value. We've lost our way as a country. And it became this tidal wave of wokeness, and it's wrong. It's wrong in business. It's wrong in your family. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. I think it's wrong against the Holy Spirit. We're all given a different, unique set of capabilities, and we all, I believe, have a mission to accomplish. And I think people are happy when they are in the role that they were created for. And people who I believe that we were created. I don't think this is an accident. I think the Creator is worthy of our praise and honor. And it gets back to the adding value part. So in business, sustainability is making more than you spend. Well, who's making the money? And if there's an entity in the corporate business, we all know it's just like the Top Gun board. We know who's getting the bombs on target on time. We know that Todd Platt is adding the most value to our company by the number of industrial warehouses that he's building. And there's a bottom line number that comes in that he's directly responsible for. And we know who else around the table on Monday mornings when we all meet, who's adding value and who's not. And there's just no time for, okay, so let me do a switch. I love sports. We owned the Mavericks for a while. I watched the Cowboys play. And I look out and I know the demographics of our country. I know the percentage of who here. It's not representative of who's on that field. Where is the 61-year-old short, fat, white guy? He's not on the Mavericks basketball team because he's not scoring points. So Mark Cuban they're putting the best players on the field who earn it, who merit that position. Same with football. And there's this, one of the greatest lies that we're all buying into is diversity is our strength. No, I don't agree with that. I believe there's a certain set of skills that are your strength, and therefore put the skill players in the roles that will add value.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I was reminiscent. Just a quick little story joke. I was asked to speak at the Arkansas National Guard unit on diversity. And I went in there, and the wing commander there was, what's this 6'6", blonde-haired, blue-eyed individual male going to talk about diversity, right? But it was, the tack that I took was diversity of thought, diversity of experience, bringing different, attitudes to bear, not necessarily based on race, sexual orientation, gender, etc. I think diversity is important, diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, right? Because you can't be myopic in your thought. And to your point, I think we have, as a culture, have bastardized that whole thought process now. So, what is your encouragement to that young entrepreneur, that young person coming up? What advice would you give them when they're early in their career, or better yet, what would you tell that 27-year-old young Matt Byrd that's coming up from what you know today to how to
do your
lead
best.
life?
Do your best. Speaking at Stanford to a graduate class, I shared with them, I said, if your parents haven't shared it with you, life's not fair. And they said, but shouldn't it be? And I said, no, it shouldn't be fair. We should have equal opportunities, but not equal outcomes, because that takes away your individual choice. Should the person that chooses to party and smoke dope and not do their homework, should they go to Stanford the same as you? Should they get the same job opportunities as you? You have choices. And with those choices come repercussions. I think the ability to choose is one of the most powerful, and it's one of the greatest.
Free will.
Free
Amen.
will in America. We have encapsulated free will. So entrepreneurs, figure out what your passion is and go for it. And take risks. Fail fast. Elon Musk, follow his model. Just go for it. Our country, and it's a meritocracy still in America, despite this tidal wave of wokeness, which I think is dissipating. Go for it. It's worth it.
Amen to that. I do that. Well, before we let you go, I want to just ask, we have a studio audience here, a couple questions from you that, basically, Quinn, you okay with that?
You bet.
Okay.
Yes, so Matt, I know you really emphasized how important family is to you, your wife Leela, and your 5 children. I'm curious, when you were with the United States Air Force on a mission, is there a specific instance or experience that you remember where you really heard from God, this is my time to go back and be with my family and to end this?
That's a great question. There was a specific instance. On the Osiris nuclear reactor raid, one of our guys dropped early, and we lost the element of surprise, and everybody with a gun started shooting. And I knew, as much as I know this is a chair and I'm touching it with the same degree of certainty, I knew I was dead. But it didn't happen. And as I'm climbing out, bullets going past my hips, screaming like I did in the glider that day, just euphoric that they didn't hit me. Now I'm thinking, okay, what is reality? What is perception? What am I here for? Why did I survive that when some of my buddies, Dale Story, got shot down?
Yeah.
Why did I survive that? And it made me really assess and grow up through that process. And I realized it was God's hand.
Any other questions?
Chad, I've heard you mention so many times how important it is to have a wingman, not just when you're flying, but in life. Have you had, Matt, who comes to mind as maybe some of the wingmen in your life, and can you share some of those experiences with us?
Well, Chad, he started Wingman. He's not afraid. He stepped out in his faith and created Wingmen and brought men together, hugely successful for breakfast. People would go have breakfast with Chad Hennings on Friday mornings and talk about their faith unafraid. The society, there's Dietrich Bonhoeffer has a book where the silence, the spiral of silence, where it almost becomes too painful to speak out because this momentum comes against you. You gave me courage to speak out. That's why I go to you on DEI and CRT and other issues, because you embolden me, you encourage me. I have the seed, but it hadn't grown into an oak tree of faith. You helped me with that. There are others too, but Chad is a big one.
Well, thank you, bud. Appreciate that. Thank you for the questions. We're going to wrap this up. Matt, thank you so much for being here, for being transparent, for sharing. I am confident that your words today are going to impact a lot of different folks out there. So
Honored. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Appreciate Leela let you be here today, and your kids, grandkids. Go forth, young man. God bless.
Honored.
Thank you.